Hey everyone, welcome back to my little corner of the internet, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Smay and today I'm going to be telling you all about my unexpected early labour and birth story. So this is my son Finn. He was born 5.5 weeks ago, and I made sure in the days following giving birth I wrote down as much as I could remember about my birth story, because I knew when time came to film this video I was probably going to be forgetting a lot of details. So if you see me looking to the side, I'm just looking at my laptop where I have all of my notes. I don't know how successful this video is going to be whilst holding Finn, but we're going to try it and see what happens. So I finished work on Friday the 12th of June when I was 37 weeks and 3 days pregnant, and I had been filming videos all throughout my pregnancy of my different trimesters. There'll be a card up above to my pregnancy and baby playlist if you want to go and check that out. I filmed a video on that day saying it was my last day of work and that I was going to be finishing that third trimester video that day, and then I was just going to be filming weekly uploads until baby Moore was born because I was going to have so much time on my hands. And little did I know, the day that I scheduled that video to go live, which was on the following Sunday the 14th, is actually when baby Moore was here. Okay, already I've lost my little assistant because I put him down for a nap because he was a bit grizzly. So anyway, I think I was just getting started on the story. So around 2 AM on Saturday the 13th of June, I woke up with what I thought were just really strong Braxton Hicks, and I'd been feeling them pretty regularly up until that point, but that was the first time that it woke me up like while I was sleeping, and it was quite uncomfortable, but it was also really manageable, so I was able to go back to sleep. And then at about 6 AM I woke up to one that was definitely stronger, still manageable but quite uncomfortable, and I felt like I had to like actually move to kind of like work through the Braxton Hick. It kind of just felt like a pretty decent period cramp that had just come on like really suddenly and then went away. That morning Nick, my husband, and I had a bunch of errands that we needed to run in town, so we went and did them as normal, and I was still feeling these Braxton Hicks that were quite strong, and I was definitely like aware that they were happening, but even walking around kind of like helped a little bit. And then I think I was also just distracted with the errands, so I didn't like notice that they were painful. That afternoon I had a nap and I just chilled out on the couch and watched some Netflix, and I wasn't feeling the contractions anymore, which is why I still thought they were Braxton Hicks. But I was still pretty tired from the day, and that night we were supposed to go to our friend's place. They were having like a barbecue party thing. So we told a little white lie. We told them that I just had a headache because I was just feeling so wiped. I didn't have the energy to go. I told Nick that he could still go, but because we weren't sure if I was experiencing labour or just like strong Braxton Hicks or what was going on, he decided to stay home with me, and we did plan on just having like a chill night and watching a movie, but I think by like 8 o'clock I was in bed completely exhausted. But now I think that was actually a good thing because it gave me energy for what was coming next. Just before 2 AM on Sunday the 14th of June, I once again woke up having quite strong contractions, but unlike when I woke up at 2 AM the day before, I had more than like 2 or 3 of these contractions, and they didn't seem to be going away, and if anything they were getting stronger, and I was feeling quite a lot of pressure. So I lay awake for about like half an hour just trying to like position myself in whatever position was comfortable, and nothing was really working. So at about 2:30 I decided to get up and I was going to move to the lounge, and I was also going to start timing these contractions. At this point I was pretty sure I was in labour, but I thought I was just still in like very early stages of labour, so I thought at least if I am in the lounge and I'm not in the bedroom, then Nick, my husband, can still at least get some sleep and he can have energy, because I'm sure later on I'm going to like need his strength and need his support. So moved to the lounge, I had my laptop and I was going to try and watch some YouTube, but the pain was just like not super intense, but it was just like quite distracting and I wasn't concentrating on anything on YouTube. So I ended up just like kneeling on the floor over my exercise ball and just like mindlessly scrolling through like Instagram and Twitter and even like BuzzFeed and stuff on my phone, just to have like something distracting that I didn't actually need to concentrate on. I feel like I probably should have prefaced this video with a little bit of a TMI warning, but I would also like to think if you're watching someone's birth story, you are probably prepared for them to go into like a little bit of like the intimate, potentially gory details. But at this point I had a lot of pressure in my butt as well, and I really didn't think it was anything to do with labour. I don't know why. Now that I think about it, it was probably pretty obvious, but I just thought that I needed to go to the toilet, and I just thought that was like something uncomfortable in amongst also being in labour. So I was trying to go to the toilet, that didn't work, and I think after about like an hour and a half of being in the lounge over my exercise ball, the contractions were still coming like at the same kind of like 6 to 7, even sometimes 4 minutes apart. But they weren't getting worse, they weren't getting better, and I was just getting quite tired. So at about like 3:30 or 4 o'clock, I hopped back into bed. At this stage Nick was awake and he was like worrying about me, and he got me a wheat bag that I just placed on my lower back because that was quite sore, and then every contraction he just very kindly like rubbed my back and tried to distract me while I just tried to breathe through the contractions. At about 4:30 in the morning I rang my midwife because at this point my contractions were lasting for almost a minute, and my app was telling me they were on average 5 minutes apart, but they were kind of irregular. Sometimes there'd be 4 minutes, sometimes there'd be 10 or like 7 minutes. So I wasn't sure, but I was, as I said, pretty sure I was in like early labour at this stage. And she said that I should just stay at home for as long as possible, because there in that environment I would probably feel more relaxed, and then I would progress in my labour, I guess, like more than I would in hospital. Because I wasn't comfortable lying over my exercise ball, I wasn't comfortable lying in bed, I decided that I would hop in the bath and hope that some warm water and some Epsom salts might kind of like help me feel a bit more comfortable. Time starts to get very blurry at this point, but I was probably in the bath for about half an hour, and I kept like rolling over to each of my sides during the contraction because I just like couldn't get comfortable. But again, Nick, my very nice husband, kindly sat with me that whole time that I was in the bath. He just like sat on the cold tiles, like very sleepy, just hitting start and stop on my contractions app because I had my hands under the water, and we weren't even really like talking. All I would say was like start, stop, start, stop, and he was just like very kind to just sit there with me and offer silent support. The bath wasn't really working, so I hopped out because again I was still feeling that pressure in my butt. So I tried to go to the toilet again, and I think I threw up at this point because I just like really wasn't feeling well, and I ended up just like lying on, we've got like a rug on our bathroom floor. I just ended up lying on that rug with my hand on the cold tiles because for whatever reason like I needed something to be cold, and just kind of like in the fetal position, just like going through the motions. I think at this point I was like, it was probably adrenaline, but I was like shaking a little bit as well, and I was definitely in my zone. I don't think Nick knew what to do at this point, but I just like needed to work through it, and for whatever reason lying in the fetal position on the bathroom floor was like the most comfortable position that I could be in. At some point I hopped back into bed because I was getting cold on the bathroom floor, no surprise because it's winter in New Zealand. And at this point my contractions were like 3 minutes apart. I was still feeling all that pressure in my butt, and they were still lasting a minute. So I think it was like 6:45 that I rang my midwife back again, mentioned all those things, told her that like I really felt like something was happening, and she very calmly just told me it was time to head to the hospital. And that was kind of like, even though I obviously knew that was going to happen, I don't know why, but that moment was quite like alarming, being like, oh shit, okay, like this is definitely happening now. I had my hospital bag basically packed, but again, because I thought I still had more time, there were still a few things that I hadn't organised, like an outfit for whatever I was going to wear to the hospital when I was like planning on going into labour. I hadn't like filled up my drink bottle or like got the last little bits of stuff ready. So we did that. It was a very slow process. It took about 20 minutes, I think, just to like find a hair tie, put some clothes on, like put the bags in the car. Because every time I had a contraction I just had to like stop and lie in the fetal position wherever I was. That was the most comfortable. Luckily, being 7 AM on a Sunday, none of our neighbours were up, because I think it would have looked quite hilarious if they had just seen me like almost collapse on the driveway into the fetal position and Nick be like walking up to the car to put the bags in the car, which is what I told him to do. He hadn't just left me. But yeah, eventually made it to the car, and I was sitting in the back seat because that was more comfortable for me, because I could kind of like lie on the side and put my legs through to where the driver is. Much like some people hate the sound of fingernails going down a blackboard, I absolutely hate and cannot stand the sound of ice like crunching. And as I said, it was like winter, so it was a very cold, icy morning, and Nick hopped in the car and then he realised that our windshield was all icy, so he had to get out and like use his debit card to like scrape the ice off the windshield. At this point, even though I absolutely like detest that sound, it gave me something else to focus on. So I've never been more happy to hear a sound that I absolutely hate, because then I didn't have to focus on the pain. The journey to the hospital felt really long, but also really short at the same time, which doesn't really make any sense. Car contractions are definitely not fun because of course with the seatbelt you're restricted, so you can't get into like a position that's most comfortable for you. But also in the car is the only time they yelled at Nick throughout my whole labour experience, which I'm pretty proud of. And the only reason I yelled at him was because going up our street, there's quite a lot of potholes, and he was going over these potholes whilst I was having a contraction. So I tried to say to him like, please can you just stop the car for a second? And he didn't hear me, so I was like, stop the car! So he like stopped in the middle of the street, waited for the contraction, and then he kept going. We made it to the hospital and we almost made it to the maternity ward. We were probably like 20 meters away, and I started having another contraction, so again I had to like lie on my side in the fetal position because it was the most comfortable. So anyone just like walking down the corridor, it would have looked really hilarious, but luckily I think a doctor saw me and yelled out to my midwife who was waiting like to greet us, and she came rushing down with a wheelchair. Once the contraction was over, she put me in the wheelchair and we wheeled me straight into a labour and delivery room, and we were in room 7. I don't know why, like I had my eyes shut that whole entire like short journey from the corridor into the labour and delivery room, but I opened them like just in time to see that we're going into room 7, and 7 is my favourite number, so for whatever reason I just thought that was like quite a cool coincidence. I hopped up on the bed and she said that she was going to check how dilated I was, and then all of a sudden she was telling me that I was 10 centimeters dilated and she was breaking my waters, and that was quite like a shocking moment because I knew I was in labour, of course, but I really thought I was still quite early on, and the fact that like all this had happened within 2 minutes of arriving at the hospital, I definitely started to freak out a little bit, like, okay, this is happening, and this is happening like right now. I think at this point I definitely went into shock, and I immediately asked her what pain medication I could have because I was really worried about my hips being sore. I have quite a bad hip and I just had all these like horror visions of like something going wrong with my hip whilst I was also in labour experiencing that pain. But she told me I was like too far along for any pain medication. The only thing I could have was gas. And I did have a few puffs of gas. I really don't think it worked with it well, or at least maybe that's just the magic of gas that like I didn't know that it was working, but I was quite distracted throughout this whole like trying to push a baby out process that like holding on to the gas was just like something else that I didn't want to have to focus on. So yeah, I didn't have much gas, and then also luckily my hips weren't sore, or at least if they were, the pain of labour was like more painful, so I don't remember the pain of my hips. Because I was already fully dilated, we started pushing straight away. So at first I was kind of kneeling on the bed leaning over the top of the bed, and then I changed to be lying on my back with like holding my knees up. And after about an hour and 15 minutes my son Finn was born at 8:55 in the morning. My husband and I had chosen not to find out the sex of our baby during my pregnancy, so that just like made that moment that much more special, finding out that it was our little baby Finn. Okay, Finn doesn't want to sleep, so he's gonna join us for the rest of this video. I had a episiotomy. I had that because my midwife says my pelvic floor and my perineum were quite tight, so she didn't want it to tear. So yeah, that was quite a weird thing because I could feel the like numbing injection that she gave me, and then I could hear the snip, but I couldn't really feel it, so that was quite strange. But yeah, that obviously all happened before he was born. And then after he was born, it took like, I think only like 8 minutes, my midwife said, to just like do a few more pushes, and then my placenta came out naturally. I'm definitely getting these details all kind of like in a weird little order, but Finn's head came out first, but then I remember the midwife saying, I think it was his right arm was like up by his shoulder as well. And it's quite weird because now if we ever let him nap, like not swaddled up like he is now, it's definitely his right arm that's always up as well. So for whatever reason, he just loves putting his right arm up. What else? Nick cut the cord. When we tried to put him on me to feed, he had trouble latching, and like he didn't really want a bar of it. So they thought there was maybe a possible tongue tie, which turns out there wasn't a tongue tie. It's just because he was born a little bit early. He wasn't prem, but he was kind of like just past being prem. They think he just like hadn't fully developed his like sucking reflex yet, so he had a bit of trouble with that in the first instance. I also hadn't started even producing colostrum at this point, so I think we were both just quite unprepared for the birth. I had told my family that I would let them know when I was in labour, and for whatever reason I just kind of thought like, oh, I'll know I'm in labour when my waters break. So in my head I kind of planned to text them either like when we were going to the hospital or when my water break, like whatever of those things happened first. And I'd just gotten like so distracted with the pain that I hadn't let them know. So when we got to the hospital and my midwife said, like, this baby is coming now, you need to start pushing, Nick was like, should I let your family know? And I was like, oh shit, yeah, please let my family know. And then obviously like an hour after him letting my family know, Finn was here. So they had kind of like expected that they were going to have to wait like a good few hours for the baby to arrive. So we quite quickly after Finn was born, we FaceTimed my family, which was really lovely, and we're able to like introduce them to their grandson, because again, like we didn't know the sex of our baby, so they didn't know like who they were going to be. And then after about an hour, the midwife had done all of the paperwork that she needed to do. I had had a shower, and then Nick had also gone down to the car to get the bags, because we just like left the bags in the car when we went up to the hospital, thinking that I'd just get checked in and then there'd be time for Nick to go down and get all the bags. But of course, because it all happened so fast, we didn't have time to go back and get the bags. So he went and got the bags out of the car. I actually felt fine to walk around quite soon after as well. Obviously there was like a lot of blood and there was a lot of pressure. I was still feeling super tired, but I was able to walk from the labour and delivery suite into the recovery room, and it was really cool. Every like nurse we passed along the way would always say like, oh, congratulations. So yeah, it was just like a pretty special moment. We ended up staying in hospital for 3 nights and 4 days. Babies also tend to lose about 10% of their body weight after they're born, because they're quite like swollen when they're born as well. And I think the average, or like the comfortable range, is between 7 and 8%, and it's if they lose over 10% that the doctors start to get a little bit worried. And Finn had lost 9% of his body weight, so it was still within like the okay range, but the doctors just wanted to keep a bit of a closer eye on him. I think it took him like another week or two to be back at his original birth weight, but yeah, when we left the hospital he was at like an acceptable weight that the doctors were happy for us to go home, and I was starting to produce a bit of milk as well, which was cool. I do plan on doing a whole other video about my breastfeeding experience and my breastfeeding journey, because it definitely hasn't been the easiest. Finn was born on the Sunday, so we got home on the Wednesday afternoon, and then unfortunately on the following Sunday, so like literally a week after he was born, we ended up back in hospital because I had some complications completely unrelated to pregnancy, which meant that I had to have pretty small surgery and be like away for Finn for that day, which was pretty horrific, and then it pushed my recovery back, of course, because I was then having to recover from surgery and from giving birth. But yeah, now as I said, we're at like 5.5 weeks and everything is looking pretty good. I think that's all I have to tell you. I had just written like bullet point notes, so hopefully I have like filled that out in enough detail. I think also eventually I might film a bit of a Q&A, so if there's anything you want to know, not even necessarily related to like labour or birth, but if there's anything you just want to know about Finn or in general, let me know down in the comments, and I'll also look to film that whenever I can. Otherwise, yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope if you are pregnant that I didn't like scare you. I'd like to think I had a pretty easy and a pretty good labour. There was actually one thing as well. It must have been like within 5 minutes of having Finn, my midwife had said to me like, oh well, if you choose to have another child, they're probably going to come a lot faster because the second labour is typically quicker, or like labour gets quicker with every baby you have. And I remember thinking like, hold on, I've literally just had this baby, like give me some time to process that before we start thinking about another child. Anyway, that is all from us. This guy has gone back to sleep, so I'm going to try and put him back down again. I hope you're all having a lovely day, and I will see you all next week with a vlog that I filmed of my first day of maternity leave. Bye!